Good morning. It is June 14th, 2006. We are in the Floyd Veterans Memorial Building in Atlanta, Georgia, to interview Commissioner of Veteran Services, Pete Wheeler. My name is Bill Stueck. I'm a historian at the University of Georgia, and my colleague Jim Cobb, also a historian at the University of Georgia, will be asking Commissioner Wheeler questions. The oral history interview is for the Richard B. Russell Library for Political Research and Studies, which is on the campus of the University of Georgia. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning and welcome. We are happy to see anybody from the University of Georgia.
Yes.
Because it brings back many fond memories. Mm-hmm. I lived in a little town down there near the University of Georgia, Crawford. The original Crawford. A lot bigger than the Crawford in Texas. We got a stoplight there, and they have a blinking light in Texas. You remember Crawford? Let me give you a little bit about Crawford before we move on to anything else. I'm so proud of Crawford. William H. Crawford, you two professors know who he was. He was ambassador to France. And he's the only man that Napoleon Bonaparte ever bowed to. And he's a great American. And we have other Crawfords now down in Texas, and I've had an opportunity to kid the president about it. We have 12 more people than they do in Texas, and we have the original. And we are proud of Georgia. We have a stoplight, and they have a blinking light down there. I can go on in detail on that, but that isn't why we're here this morning.
Can you tell us your date of birth? And you've already told us your place of birth.
I can tell you this. I'm going to quote something from Douglas MacArthur. He had on his wall while he was over in Tokyo when we occupied Japan following World War II. And I'm not going into the details, but he had this on his wall. He said, you're as young as your faith and old as your doubt, and you're young as your self-confidence. And you're young as your faith, and you're young as your self-confidence, old as your fear, and I have no fear. You're young as your hope, and you're old as your despair, and I don't have any of them. I'm very happy where I am, and I've enjoyed every minute of the work that I do here. I was born in Albany, Georgia, Dougherty County, but I grew up and was raised in the great city of Crawford, Georgia, that I just told you a minute ago.
Can you tell us the schools you attended?
Yes, and I might say, before I do that, I attended Crawford High School, which doesn't exist anymore, and I was president of the senior class in 1939. And living there near the university, I had an opportunity to attend the very first football game played at Sanford Stadium when it opened, named after Chancellor S.V. Sanford, who was Chancellor of the University System when I was there. Harmon Carver was president. And living in Athens also gave me an opportunity. Franklin D. Roosevelt came down on the stadium once. The car drove up, he and Governor E.D. Rivers, who was governor of Georgia at that time, and I had an opportunity to see the president then, and he went on to Barnesville there by train, and came out against Walter George, who was a U.S. Senator then. And then the reason he was against Walter George was that he wanted to enlarge the Supreme Court of the United States of America, add more members where everything he'd do would be constitutional. Senator George opposed it. And I can remember that day when he endorsed another candidate against Senator George. Senator George said these words, "Mr. President, I accept your challenge," and Senator George won. Senator George was a great man. He lost a son in World War II and very sympathetic to veterans and very responsible for starting the GI Bill, which educated many World War II veterans who would not have had an education had it not been for the GI Bill education.
So you graduated from high school in 1939?
That's correct.
And you went straight to the University of
No,
Georgia?
I did not. I went to Emory at Oxford and then Emory at Valdosta, which does not exist anymore. I think they closed it when I left. I transferred as quick as I could to the University of Georgia and graduated there in 1943. While I was there, of course, World War II started. December the 7th, 1941, I was at the university and I was taking ROTC. And I was in the cavalry, riding horses with boots. In fact, I fell off a horse near the ROTC building over there where we dedicated a memorial to veterans recently. And it's been a great honor to have been at Georgia. While I was there, I was ROTC, and in order to remain there, we had to sign up for the reserves in 1942 to complete our education there at the university. When I graduated in 1943, and we were immediately called to active duty. And at that time, I went on active duty with the U.S. Army. I'd gotten out of the cavalry. I had enough of horses. And I remained in the Army until 1946. And then I was in the Reserves and National Guard. And I remained there until 1978. And I retired from the military in 1978.
Can you tell us what your major was at the University of Georgia?
Well, you might say it was ROTC. we had to maintain a certain average to stay there. Otherwise, we'd go right into service. And I wanted to make sure I finished ROTC first. It was education, BS in education. Mm-hmm. And later I went to law school here in Atlanta. While I was working with the federal government, I went to night school, John Marshall Law School at night. And the first job I had in 1946 after getting out of service was with the federal government, a government agency known as OPA, Office of Price Administration. That was part of World War II because keeping prices under control, you had to keep everything was controlled, price control. And I was in lumber enforcement and had 8 states from Florida up to Virginia, where we visited and tried to check and make sure that the price of lumber did not exceed the amount that the government allowed. And then when that ended, the price control on lumber and other things ended, we still had rent control. And I was made area rent director for northwest Georgia, out of Rome, Georgia, where I lived in a hotel 4 nights a week and then back in Atlanta that night. And then, of course, I came with the Department of Veterans Service. I had a good friend that was governor at that time. I knew him when I was a student at Athens. He was not a student. He was practicing law with his father then, Hammond Talmadge. I knew him well, and I became associated with the administration then, and I've been here this is my 14th term, and I'm enjoying every minute of it. And I enjoy it because we're helping people. If I was collecting income tax, I would have quit years ago or retired. But I'm helping people. There's an old hymn, by the way, that I remember as a child that I still have it with me, and I give it to new members of our staff when they come in. And it's help somebody today, somebody along life's way. I know I picked up the wrong one. I got the right one now. Look all around you, find someone in need. Help somebody today. Though it be a little neighborly deed, help somebody today. Many are waiting a kind and loving word. Help somebody today. Some veterans we are unable to help, but we can listen. And that's very important. And try to get them all the benefits to which they are entitled. And no veterans benefit is automatic. You got to apply for them, and it's our job to help them apply and let them know about it where they can apply for all the benefits they're entitled. And we'd like to point out the fact that we have done quite well here in Georgia. on veterans benefits. We, when compared to other states, we have fewer veterans, but we're bringing in more money than 5 other states that have more veterans.
Can you, before we get too far away from World War II,
right.
Can you tell us where you served in World War II?
I served mostly in California, training men for combat. And if it hadn't been for the atomic bomb, I'm sure that I would have been in the South Pacific. But we were training people for combat missions, and that was my job in World War II.
Now, you were released in 1946?
That's correct.
Do you remember when in 46?
I believe it was March of 46.
Okay. So, but a lot of folks were released
They were
earlier
released
than
at
that.
different times, yes, that's correct.
And
And
so why were you a little later?
Well, you know, there's an old Amish saying that we used to teach our people. Yours is not to ask why, but to do or die. And I didn't ask why. I went out when I was supposed to go out.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't question anything about it other than I wanted to remain in the reserves, which I did, and I became a member of the National Guard when Governor Vanderbilt was the Adjutant General. And Governor Vanderbilt, by the way, was a senior when I was a freshman at the University of Georgia, and we were close friends. And he was the campaign manager, along with Roy Harris, when Talmadge was elected governor. Herman Talmadge was elected governor. And Vanderbilt was Adjutant General when I transferred over to the Guard and remained until 1978. Also, when I was at the University of Georgia, Carl Sanders was a freshman. And he was Bulldog Williams' freshman. Sanders had a football scholarship his first year. And the freshman had to wait on the upperclassmen. And he was Bulldog Williams' freshman, and he had to, Bulldog was a good friend of mine. We used to send Carl down to get the Coca-Colas for us to drink. You notice I did say Coca-Cola, holy water.
Can you talk a little bit more about what the Commissioner of Veterans Affairs did in 1949?
Well,
and I assume it was an
some of
appointed
us-
position.
no, it was elected position.
It was elected position.
Elected by a board, a constitutional board. We have a 7-person constitutional board that have to be a resident of Georgia and a veteran, a wartime veteran. And the board elects the commissioner. And I've been fortunate enough to have been elected 14 times by different board members through the years.
So it's a
And
4-year term?
That's correct.
And how is the board chosen?
The board, the governor gets one appointment each year. And it's chosen the same way the Board of Regents is chosen, by the governor.
Mm-hmm.
And the governor gets one appointment each year, and there's 7 members of the board. And it's a constitutional board. And it's working out very well, and we think we have the best operation in the state, in the nation. Mm-hmm. Because we go out and make sure the veteran gets the benefit. And since I've been here, we've had one major project each year that we worked on. When I first came in, there were 10,000 patients at Milledgeville. It was called then the Insane Asylum. We knew that there were many veterans there at Milledgeville, but they were scattered out among 10,000 people. The first thing we did after I got here was to make sure that we identified all the veterans at Milledgeville and then move them into one building where we could work with them in getting them the benefits to which they might have been entitled. As soon as we were able to do that through the legislature, going to the House and Senate and the governor, we set aside a building at Milledgeville where we did that, and which is now a most beautiful facility, a beautiful facility there. We have we got about 500 or 600 veterans there now, receiving nursing home care and domiciliary care. And we also have the most beautiful Alzheimer's unit in America. The Alzheimer's people helped us design it, where you could walk all you want to walk inside and outside the building. And it doesn't look like a prison. It looks like a Ritz-Carlton hotel lobby with beautiful shrubbery outside, and there's an entrance where you can walk in and out. And the Alzheimer's people who are bedridden they can be cared for in a nursing home because they cannot get out of bed to harm somebody. The walking man or woman slinging their arms could hurt somebody in a nursing home, and therefore that's the most unmet medical need, I think, in America today, is the care and treatment of the walking Alzheimer patient. And in a hurry to get there and not know where they are once they get there, and in a hurry to go on. And we have a beautiful unit there at Milledgeville that we're very proud of, and we have recreation for them, and we have an outpatient medical care treatment the VA does there. They come in there, bring doctors once a week, and we're very proud of it. Now, in Augusta, during the Sanders administration and then the Maddox administration, we opened the first state veterans nursing home in America, operated by the state to treat veterans with federal and state funds to build it. And it's built right across from the Medical College of Georgia. And you get more care there than you get in a VA, well, any hospital in the world, I guess, because the Medical College operates it for us by contract, and the top specialists in every field are through that nursing home every day. It's right across the street from the Medical College of Georgia, and we're extremely proud of that. We're also proud of the fact that Georgia is the only state in the Union that does not charge veterans anything. Georgia veterans, they got to be from Georgia, legal residents of Georgia, and veterans. We don't charge a veteran anything for his care and treatment. Every other state does get something out of the veteran for the care and treatment, but we don't in Georgia. And most of our funds that we appropriated from the state go to Augusta, where we have over 200 veterans down there and about over 500 in Milledgeville.
So your job,
that is one phase of it.
Mm-hmm. In many ways, is to use both state and federal agencies. Now, so we have what we call GI bills that are passed periodically by the federal government.
I'm glad you mentioned the GI Bill. The Georgia Department of Veterans Service is a state approval agency for all veterans educational training, and it may come as a shock to you to know that the University of Georgia, where you represent the University of Georgia, we have to approve the University of Georgia, and we check there once a month to see that you are doing, we have a checklist, we check if you train veterans at the University of Georgia or any other school in Georgia that trains veterans, we have to approve that and check on it to see that they're getting what they're entitled to. The reason we have to do that, some schools, I won't name any of them now, but they've been prosecuted because the veteran wasn't required to go to school. They were just getting the money and not required, and some people have gone to prison for that. But we are the state approval agency. We are #1 in the nation for veterans on-the-job training. We train businesses. We approve businesses all over the state to train veterans, and the veteran receives his GI Bill money for being trained for a position. And so we are the state approval agency. That's one of our functions here in the Department of Veterans Service, in addition to the nursing homes and the domiciliaries and the Alzheimer's unit. And as I mentioned a minute ago, we always have one project, at least one big one each year. We built the most beautiful cemetery, I think, in the world, in Milledgeville, a state cemetery with federal funds, 100% federal funds. The land was transferred from the Forestry Commission over to us. It's on the Cobb Vincent Highway near our nursing home in Milledgeville. We have a chapel there with stained glass windows in it pointing up. The architect brought it in to me and it had square windows. I said, no, we want them pointed up. Give some people an idea about where they ought to be trying to go. Although we can't tell them, we can point the direction and make them think about it. We have a beautiful lake behind the cemetery, in the cemetery. We have a coliseum area. We have an office there, and we have a clarion that plays 100 hymns, and Amazing Grace is the most requested of all hymns to be played during the funeral. And now, since we completed that, many veterans have been buried there every day in Georgia, Milledgeville. We are now working on a new cemetery, building a new cemetery, establishing a new cemetery at Glenville, Georgia, near Fort Stueck. Fort Stueck, as you know, is a very active military base, a lot of retirees there, and we are establishing a state cemetery there. Last Sunday afternoon, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs and I had the honor of dedicating a new cemetery at about 40 miles north of Atlanta, Kent. The land, 775 acres of land, was donated by a wealthy Georgian who served, landed in Normandy on D-Day, Scott Hudgens. And Scott came to the office one day and says, I landed in Normandy D-Day. He's a billionaire, by the way. And he said, I went back over there recently to visit the graves of those that were killed the day we landed, which is 62 years ago, June the 6th this year. And he said, I had a vision while I was there. Looking out, you see the English Channel. He said, I have land in Georgia we can do the same thing with, overlooking Lake Altoona, 775 acres of land. Nobody's ever lived on this land, not even Indians. And the streams running through there, the river, the water is clear as the water you drink. It's a beautiful place. We dedicated that last Sunday, and it's a beautiful place. So we have a project all the time that we're working on, and that's what makes it very interesting to be in this work. We're helping people, and we're getting them what they deserve. As I mentioned a minute ago, no veterans benefit is automatic. You got to know about it, and then you got to apply for it. And that's our job, to make sure that every Georgia veteran gets every benefit, state and federal, that he may be entitled to, and we've been very successful in doing that.
Could we try to be a little bit more specific on the distinction between a federal benefit and a state benefit? Now, you talked about Georgia being the one state where all the expenses for a disabled veteran are covered?
I said a nursing home situation.
Okay.
State nursing homes, which the federal government pays part of the cost.
I see. And
we have a contract with them to pay part of the cost, and the state pays part of the cost of the operation.
Okay.
And every other state has one, and we just happen to be the only state that doesn't charge.
Okay.
And
now the federal government is when we talk about the GI bills, we tend, historians that is, tend to focus on education and housing, low cost mortgages and so forth. Could you talk a little bit about where the state kind of picks up from what the federal government is doing in terms of funding?
Well, we have certain tax exemptions in the state for homes that are wholly financed 100% by the VA, disabled 100% disabled veterans. There are many statutes on the book, state law books, that give us the right to give them certain things, free hunting and fishing license. The driver's license, for example, to drive an automobile or a truck, the veteran gets the benefit free in Georgia. a free driver's license
Mhm.
if you honorably discharged veteran during wartime service, and we approve it, and then the state, they've changed several times who issues the driver's licenses. Used to be the state patrol, but now it's another agency. We approve it, and they get a free driver's license, and there are many other benefits that they get. If you are disabled in any way, as much as 10%, you're entitled to go into state parks at a reduced fee, and many other state benefits.
When you talk about all the buildings that you have had a role
Yeah.
in having built,
Yes.
were those built predominantly from federal or state funding?
Both state and federal. The building at, as I mentioned before, in Augusta, we had Cobb introduced the legislation, Congressman Cobb, great American Georgia congressman, introduced the legislation and gave the state money. We got half of the appropriation, vast appropriation for building nursing homes in Augusta. And he was expecting that to be built in Milledgeville, his home. And he called me one day and said, I got the legislation through. Well, he faced when he called you on the phone. I'm talking about Cobb Vinson, the great American congressman from Georgia. When he called you on the telephone, the first thing he'd say, are you for me or against me? I said, I'm for you, Mr. Vinson. He said, well, you do so-and-so then. That was the way he started his conversation. If you called him, he'd answer the phone, all right. That's the way he'd answer the telephone, all right. But anyway, he was very upset with me because Carl Sanders was governor, by the way, and he wanted it built in Augusta, across from the medical college. Vinson wanted it in Milledgeville, but the governor controlled the state funds that were necessary, so it was built in Augusta. I told him, though, the first one we built after that would be in Milledgeville, and we did. We built the Carl Vinson building there where we house veterans who need nursing care. And then later we dedicated one, the Richard B. Russell building. And I think the last picture that the senator had made when we took him a copy of that, a picture of that building up there to show it to him. Mr. Vinson passed there one day and looked at both buildings, and he called me on the phone and said, I passed my building this morning and passed Russell's building. Said, I noticed that my name is in smaller letters than his. Why is that? I said, it'll be changed, Mr. Vinson. We're going to get them both the same size, and we did right away, made them both the same size. He was a great American, and so was Richard B. Russell, and this state benefited from the service of both of these great men. And I'm happy to say that I'm old enough to my uncle went to school with Richard B. Russell at Gordon Military College Institute then. And I attended the first inauguration I attended was Richard B. Russell's inauguration as governor. Governor Hardeman was going out, a doctor from Commerce, Georgia, and Richard B. Russell had been Speaker of the House. And that's the first time I went in the governor's office, and I've tried to remain close there ever since. But one governor told me that he thought I came over here with General Oglethorpe, and we established the Veterans Department then, but that wasn't correct. It's been since then. But I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Because of that, your long tenure here, could you give us an idea of how large this place was when you came, and some sense of the expansion?
This building you're in now, the Twin Towers building, was a railroad station when I came here, and the train ran from here to Augusta once a day, went down to Augusta and came back here on this spot. The Capitol at that time was unair conditioned, and we worked a half a day on Saturday, And we had no merit system and no retirement system. A lot of things have changed for the better in the years that I've been here. And it's been a great pleasure. I enjoy being here every day because we're helping somebody. When I go home at night, I think about how many people that we've been able to help today get what they're entitled to as a veteran from the federal and state government, all their families. And we're losing about 500 to 600 veterans a month are passing on. That creates work on our field offices. We have field offices all over the state that cover every county, 159 counties. We go into every one of them at least once a month, or at least are available to them. And we assist the veteran's widow, and we assist in funeral arrangements. I told you a minute ago about the cemeteries, and they have a beautiful place to have a ceremony. And we have grave liners already in the ground, and put the marker up after they're buried. And those that want to be burned, why, and I'm going to let the devil do that if it's done at all. I'm going to go out the regular way.
Can you talk about the various veterans, that is, of various wars,
Yeah.
that you served when you first came in 1949?
Well, it took a long time for the World War II memorial to come about. It was the last memorial of any importance just about built for veterans in Washington. The Vietnam Memorial was built, and the Korean Memorial was built there before our World War II memorial. We just dedicated it last year, which I was very fortunate to be chairman of the advisory commission for that. And we were able to bring in Bob Dole as chairman of the campaign committee to help raise money. And I want to tell you a little story about that while I'm thinking about it. The first man Bob Dole called was a former Marine from Memphis, Tennessee. And when he got out of the Marine Corps, he decided he wanted to get his master's degree in business administration at Harvard. So when he went to Harvard, the professors told him he had to do a thesis on how to start a business. And he worked on it hard, and he came up with it. And the professors laughed at him and said, "No," said, "you're going to have to redo this. This is impossible. You're going to have to do it." He said, "No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to rewrite it. I'm going back to Memphis and show you." FedEx, Federal Express, was the thesis, and Fred Smith started Federal Express. He wrote us a check, personal check for $2 million, and he said, "I'll help you raise the rest of the money." Now, Fred didn't tell me this, but I understand, and being two professors, you can understand this too. I understand slowly every day a double trailer FedEx truck slowly rides around the Harvard campus. So he helped us get started. Well, we raised $192 million, and we have a beautiful monument there. And I just learned the other day that I have a picture of it in there somewhere. Kilroy, somebody discovered he was there on the back part of the monument. If any World War II veterans, anybody familiar with World War II, Kilroy was here. He's overlooking, it's inside, I'll show it to you in a minute. Somebody discovered he's engraved in the Georgia granite. It's up there right behind the Washington Monument facing the Lincoln Memorial. Kilroy is part of the World War II memorial. And the state of Georgia contributed $1 for every veteran who served in World War II toward the purchase of this, establishing this memorial. World War II was a great victory for America. We wouldn't have a Washington Monument today or Lincoln Memorial, either one, if we'd lost World War II. We freed a lot of people, and the German people are now our allies. The Japanese are our allies today, thanks to people like George Marshall, to me one of the greatest generals in World War II, Governor Vanderbilt and I had the opportunity of spending the afternoon once with General Marshall. It might be interesting to people from Georgia to know that General Marshall, before World War II, was stationed in Georgia, heading up the civilian conservation camps, CCC camps, where young men went to get 3 meals a day, and they established parks and did a lot of work in improving the conditions of our state. He was in charge of the CC camps in Georgia before he went up as chief of staff. As a sidelight, I understand that he had a photostatic memory, by the way. He was very proud of the fact that he could remember everything that ever happened, everything he ever looked at. He could name every county in Georgia and every precinct in every county in Georgia just from his photostatic memory. President Roosevelt heard about his photostatic memory. He hadn't met General Marshall. He called him just George Marshall, later Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense. He called General Marshall in and said, he went in the Oval Office, and Roosevelt said, a cigarette holder, "Hello, George. Old boy, have a seat over there, George." General Marshall stood at attention in front of the president, at attention, and looked him in the eye and said, "Mr. President, my name is General Marshall." He said, "You're exactly the man I'm looking for. You're exactly what I want." And General Marshall, although he's not given the credit he should have gotten, he led us to victory in World War II. He was boss, Eisenhower's boss, MacArthur, all the rest of them, and he was a great American. And he didn't go to West Point either. But he was
VMI.
That's correct. You're correct. VMI.
Well, he's gotten plenty of credit from historians.
Well, it's about time. He deserves every bit of it. And not after the war, the Marshall Plan, which helped bring our enemies, making friends out of them, and they're now our allies, thanks to General Marshall. He was a great American. I don't think you can give him too much credit, though. He was great.
I take it from your response to the question about the veterans from various wars with which you dealt, that basically you started with World War II
Yeah,
veterans.
we can go on if you want to.
That is, you didn't have much to do with, say, veterans from the Spanish-American War
Yes,
or
we
World
did.
War I.
In fact, something to do with the war between the states. My buddy there from Connecticut, I tell him the war of northern aggression. But it's really a war between the states. And when I came in here, we were paying pensions to the widows of the war between the states, the Civil War. And I didn't believe we had that many, and I made sure our people went out and checked to make sure. We sent the money to the ordinary of the county, and the ordinary of the county delivered the checks to the widows. We had a Confederate nursing home when I came in here, and it was for the widows when I was here, got here. And we took care of the widows in that they were not entitled to anything from the federal at that time. Actually, this department started with the pensions part long before I got here. When I got here, there were a lot of veterans of the Spanish-American War of 1898 with Spain, and when we freed Cuba and got the Philippine Islands straightened out. At that time it was. And we had a lot of veterans from 1898 that were living a long time after I got here. In fact, we had one employee who was a veteran of the Spanish-American War. And one of our distant relatives, I'm told, he was an Army officer in the U.S. Army before the war between the states, and then he became a Confederate general. After the war was over, he got his commission back in the U.S. Army and went on to fight in the Spanish-American War, General Joe Wheeler. And I understand he got excited once when they were fighting the Spaniards. He said, "Come on, boys, we got the Yankees on the run." But we we kind of lost a little interest in him. He was from Georgia, but he moved to Alabama and became a congressman over in Alabama. And there's a little stop over there, Wheeler, Alabama, where he lived. A beautiful place, still open to the public. But I don't think I was in the active National Guard during the time of the Korean War and also the Vietnam War. And I can remember very well being in uniform, and members of my staff were with me at a Howard Johnson here in Atlanta having lunch one Sunday, and we were actually insulted. And if you walked down the street in a uniform, people would make fun of you during that war. And they were not treated right when they returned home. Vietnam veterans were never honored as they should have been. But we made sure that they got all the benefits, and still making sure they get all the benefits to which they may be entitled.
Could you compare a little bit your dealings with veterans from the various wars, say since World War II, in terms of particular needs and services?
Well, we have a lot of lady veterans now, and of course the VA hospitals are now in the process of being remodeled to have more private rooms and new bathrooms and more female doctors. And we have a lot of outstanding women who have served in the military. In fact, we have a lady who's been chairman of our board who was in the military, and we are very proud of her. She was in the Marine Corps, sergeant in the Marine Corps. The service has been the same to all of them. We try to treat everybody equally, veteran and the veteran and his family or her family, and we try to do all we can for the widows of all wars, and we've been able to do that.
Now, did you have any responsibilities in relation to women who served in the WACs or the WAYs during World War II?
Well, my wife was an Army cadet nurse in World War II. She is right there. And I met her in a hospital, and we've been married since 1949. I think we'll be married till one of us pass on. She's a beautiful lady, and we've been in love for many years. We've been married since 1949. I think it'll last forever. I know it will. And she was an Army cadet nurse in World War II. Her father was active duty military, who served the country during that time.
Did veterans benefits apply to her at that time in '49?
Yes, but the war was over before she actually got her commission. World War II was over when she got her commission, before she got a commission. And she worked temporarily with the VA after that, and then she went into public health nursing after that, and then when our first child was born, she has looked after our kids. We had 3 children. My son is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and also Mercer, and also Georgia State. He has 3 degrees. He's the general counsel for the Gwinnett Hospital System. It's Peter B. Chip Wheeler, and he's an attorney and represents the hospitals in Gwinnett County. There are 2 large hospitals there. He's their general counsel. We have a daughter who's Frances, graduated from Georgia State and Oglethorpe University, and she attended the University of Georgia and was a tri-delt there, and she's a teacher in Gwinnett County, and she's married to the son of Bishop Bevel Jones of the Methodist Church, and they have 3 fine children, all boys, 3 boys, and one of them's in college, and the other 2, one's in high school and the other's in grammar school. Then we have our daughter Jane, was a teacher also. She was Phi Beta Kappa at the University of Georgia. She was a Phi Mu, and she has passed on, but her son is over there now as a student at the university. He'll get 2 degrees this fall. All he needs is a PE course. He got an AB degree and a BS degree, and he plans to go to law school. He was accepted at Oxford, but he's going to go to law school in Athens. And we're very proud of our children and our grandchildren. All 3, we have 5 boys and 1 girl, and she's in charge. She's going to Georgia State this fall, Joanna. And veterans of all wars, they're all veterans and they're all great Americans as far as I'm concerned, and we show no partiality to any. You may be interested in this, and I'm sure it'll be one of your questions perhaps. We are very proud of the fact that the Department of Veterans Service recognized our African American soldiers, and we were the first state agency to equalize and join together the races in our home at Milledgeville, Georgia. Georgia War Veterans Home in Milledgeville was desegregated, and we ended segregation. We were the first agency, even before the University of Georgia. We ended segregation in our department, the first one, and I'm very proud of that.
When, do you remember the date of that?
Not exactly right offhand. I can look it up and tell you, but it was before the school system was desegregated. We desegregated our people first, and we're very proud we did. I had about 4 or 5 members of the NACP from Milledgeville, Georgia, nice guys, came up to see me one day in my office. And they said, we don't want to cause any problem, any trouble. We think our veterans ought to be treated the same way at our home in Milledgeville as others. We'd like to do more for them. I said, I agree with you. And I got the approval of our board to do it. And we were the first ones to do it. And we are very proud of that fact. And I point that out to a lot of people, that we are so proud of the fact that we took the first step. Now also, the man that introduced the legislation that desegregated the armed forces was Cobb from Milledgeville, Georgia. And he deserves full credit for desegregating the armed forces. And I was real proud of him for doing it.
I don't quite understand that point.
He was chairman of the Armed Services Committee. He was also, before they established the Armed Services Committee, he was chairman of the Naval Affairs Committee. In fact, he was chairman of Naval Affairs during World War II. And so was Roosevelt at one time, chairman of Naval Affairs. President Roosevelt was. And Vincent was able to do many things that a lot of people don't realize he's able to do. For example, he went in to see Roosevelt one day, President Roosevelt, who had been Secretary of the Navy, and he said, Mr. President, I want to build a Navy hospital in Dublin, Georgia. The President, who is Secretary of the Navy, said, well, Carl, what port is that? I don't recall that being a port. He said, it's not, it's in my district. He said, well, how are we going to get the ships in and out of a place that doesn't have a port? He said, we're going to have an airport there, and you're going to build an airport for the Navy hospital, and we're going to fly them in there. It's in my district. And he was smart enough to include in the legislation, not may but shall. Should the Navy, U.S. Navy, ever give that facility up, the Veterans Administration shall establish a VA hospital there. And we have a VA hospital in Dublin, Georgia because of that. It was a Navy hospital first. And they have an airport there in Dublin, Georgia because of Carl Vinson. I could tell you many more things about him. He was a great American. So was Senator Russell.
Could you tell us, in dealing with the segregation issue, in terms of benefits to African American veterans in Georgia coming out of World War II, how were they administered?
The same way. Everybody's treated equal on the benefits.
But was that administered through the federal system, the government
federal
completely?
Federal and state, yeah. Maybe I ought to make myself clear. The state has certain benefits, but our main job, as far as benefits are concerned, no veteran's benefit is automatic. You got to know about it first, and then you got to have some assistance in applying for them. And that's our job. We have a claims staff that represent veterans before VA rating boards. They have a board, and we actually act as their attorney or representative before these boards, and try to convince the board that they meet all the requirements of a certain law, that they are seeking compensation for service-connected disabilities or anything else related to federal benefits. We also assist on state benefits, getting all the benefits to which they may be entitled under federal and state. But the VA doesn't go out looking for people to give them money. We do, and it's not a gift. They earned it, and we want to make sure that people that earn the benefit, that they receive it. And we have offices scattered out all over Georgia that actually assist veterans firsthand to get all the benefits to which they may be entitled from the federal and the state government. And by the way, we're just getting back quite a few new veterans who went overseas last May, and they came back this May. And we got several thousand new veterans in Georgia, and we are meeting with them to see that they receive all the benefits to which they may be entitled in about 27 locations over the state. After they've had an opportunity to come home and relax and visit with their family, we'll attend the first drill and be available to assist them in getting all the benefits to which they may be entitled. Georgia National Guardsmen who have been in Iraq, and a lot of them have been under a lot of pressure over there. It's very hot over there, and 26 did not make it back. And of course, we try to assist their families in every way we can. The fact that they didn't come back.
Before the Veterans Hospital at Milledgeville was desegregated,
Yeah.
was there a Veterans Hospital for African American veterans?
Yes.
There was? Where was that?
In Milledgeville.
Oh.
Well, there wasn't one for any veteran when I came in here.
Mm-hmm.
As I told you earlier in our conversation, when I came in, there were 10,000 patients at Milledgeville. Mm-hmm. And the veterans were scattered out among the patients, and I sent in a team of about 4 people there. They spent months there trying to find out who was a veteran and who wasn't a veteran, where we could help them. And we went into all veterans, regardless of race, class, anything else, and make sure that they got all the benefits to which they may be entitled. And we got them separated from the other 10,000 patients where we could see that they got all the benefits they were entitled to. And then a short time afterwards, we asked for and received permission from our board to integrate the two together, which has worked out wonderful down there in Milledgeville. Mm-hmm. And of course, our other facilities are also integrated.
Could you tell us a bit about the size of your office in 1949 compared to the size of it today?
Well, it's probably bigger than it is now.
Well, I'd be very surprised if it wasn't, but how many people were there? Well, where was your office in 1949?
It was in the Capitol, state Capitol. I was on the ground floor, and I had offices around the Capitol here, an office across the street over 700th Street. And at one time, we had offices in Georgia State, what is now Georgia State University. Mm-hmm. In fact, the state retirement system was started in the lobby of my office.
Mm-hmm. How big was your staff in 1949?
Larger than now. We had a lot larger staff. I don't recall. I can look it up, but we operating with fewer people now than we had in 1949.
Why? I mean, why has there been a reduction?
Because we're getting more service out of the people that are working. We're training them better, and they know what they're doing, and we demand more from them than when I got here.
Are they, in terms of the people
They have
that
to
you
pass
hire?
certain tests and all, merit system tests.
Oh, I see. So,
Not merit system tests, but before we can represent a veteran before a VA rating board, you have to be certified to do that. And we have to train our people to make sure they understand the law and the regulations.
when did your employees come under civil service regulations? When was that change made?
I don't recall the exact date, but I'm glad we're under it. And we were not under it when I came here, and there was no merit system when I came in. I think the first department of state government that had any merit system was maybe the Department of Labor at that time. That's most of federal funded. We get federal funds for our education division. They pay 100% for that. For the state approves, where we check the schools and on-the-job training sites, we get federal funds for our cemetery. And we also receive federal funds for our hospital, our nursing home, and domiciliary operation, and Alzheimer's unit. So we have a very close working relationship with the Veterans Administration in Washington. I've had the honor of knowing every head of the VA, meeting them at one time or another, and we've had many good people heading the Veterans Administration, and it's been an honor to work with them, as well as the presidents we've had and the governors we've had. Beginning, as you see over there on the wall, the various governors I've been with, all of them are great Americans, and we're interested in veterans. Most of them are veterans themselves.
Commissioner, historians are just now starting to realize how important World War II veterans coming back were in terms of they seem to get much more involved in politics after the war. And I know Herman Talmadge was a vet.
He was in the Navy. He was in the Navy.
And so was Marvin Griffin and Ernest Vandiver too.
That's right.
For sure.
Carl Sanders.
So
Jimmy Carter.
that hopefully translated into a lot of sympathy for what you were doing in your capacity.
They were all very cooperative. We've never had a governor that didn't that I didn't work closely with. That we got much done for veterans through the years, and I'm in my 14th term now, and I expect, good Lord willing, I expect to serve it out.
Could you talk a little bit?
I'll have 60 years state service at that time, and before that, I told you I was with the federal government. Okay.
Could you talk a little bit about your relationship with voluntary associations such as the American Legion, VFW?
I don't like to refer to them as voluntary. They're a hard-working group, and a lot of them are volunteers, of course. They devote their time free of charge to hospitals and all.
How about NGOs?
We represent the American Legion in Georgia before the VA rating boards that decide on claims, and the state service officer for the VFW is a member of our staff, and the American Legion also, and we represent other veterans organizations and work with all of them. All of them are great organizations. I don't think we'd have any benefits today if it wasn't for the veterans organizations over the country working to see that we maintain them and lobbying for veterans. All of them are doing great jobs. The American Legion, VFW, the AMVETS, the DAV, Disabled American Veterans, the Paralyzed Veterans Association. All of them are doing great jobs for the veterans. And then the old Reserve Officers Association is called now the Military Officers Association. I'm a life member of that. I've been a member of the American Legion 60 years. That's my 60-year plaque over there. And while I'm looking over there, you might see that's Winston Churchill III over on the wall with General Myers. Churchill was there for the World War II memorial dedication when we dedicated it. And he was there. He said this first time he'd been back to America since his mother, her funeral. She was married to Abel Harriman, of course, and her funeral was there in the National Cathedral in Washington.
Commissioner, you were talking about Carl Vinson and, of course, Richard Russell were just two of our great advocates for the state and for their constituents. But how has the fact that Georgia does have, let's say, a pretty good share of military installations, they used to have more, how has that affected the work that your office has done? I mean, does that mean that we actually have more veterans who live in Georgia because we have more military installations in some places? Does that make for a more supportive environment of the military? Or?
Well, we rank about number 9 or 10 in the nation as the number of veterans, period. And you mentioned the name of two great Americans when you mentioned the name of Russell and Vinson. I told you a little earlier that I attended Russell's inauguration when he was governor. And through Russell, I met Lyndon Johnson, who was later President of the United States. He established the first study commission that went in depth studying the Veterans Administration and the needs of veterans. And he appointed me to that commission when he was president. And we held hearings all over the United States trying to find out in what direction we needed to head in the future for the VA. And I gave you a copy of our annual report that we presented to the president at the conclusion of that study. I can remember meeting Carl Albert, who was Speaker of the House then from Oklahoma, and others. And we held hearings in Oklahoma City and all over the country, New York and other places, Philadelphia. And it's been used as a guide since then on Veterans Affairs. Senator Russell really had a lot to do with making Lyndon Johnson majority leader and later president. A close relationship there. And Cobb Vinson was one of the greatest men I think we've ever had from Georgia. And they were responsible for having many military bases in Georgia. Warner Robins, for example, wouldn't be there if it hadn't been for Vinson, and others all over the state. So it's been a great trip, and I've enjoyed every minute of it, knowing these great people. I told you a minute ago about President Johnson driving a limousine once from Austin down to Johnson City. He told the Secret Service he was going to drive, and he was driving his car fast, this limousine fast. State trooper pulled up next to him and didn't know who it was, came up. Johnson let the window down. He said, "Oh my God." He said, "Well, at least you know who I am."
You mentioned that Georgia is 9th or 10th in
That's
the total
correct.
number of veterans.
Yes, that's right.
What number would Georgia be in terms of population? We're somewhere around, in other words, do we have a disproportionate number of veterans?
No, we don't.
We don't.
We
So it's about average.
That's right. Keep in mind, we got the largest state east of the Mississippi River, the state of Georgia. We used to go all the way to Louisiana. Had Alabama and Mississippi, and if they don't start acting better, we're going to take them over again, I think.
We must, people have discovered that Georgia's such a great place to live. We get a lot of retirees
Yes,
who come in as veterans.
that's true.
I would
A lot of them are moving in, and we're happy to have them. They're good people. It's an honor to work with them. And some of them are now reaching the age that they need the disabilities increase as they get older, and that's what our officers out in the field are for, to assist them in getting the benefits to which they may be entitled from the federal and the state government. And then once the office fills out the application, we have trained people at the VA regional office that represents the veteran before the rating board that makes a decision on what the disability should be. We have offices located in each of the VA hospitals in Georgia, and there are 3 of them, one in Augusta, one in Dublin, and one large hospital here in Atlanta. And since you mentioned hospitals, we're talking about hospitals. We have the first hospital in America, VA hospital in America, the only one up until now, where we're taking active duty people who have been wounded in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we're taking care, I say we, the Veterans Administration Hospital in Augusta, Georgia, is taking care of wounded active duty people who haven't been discharged from the service from all branches, the Army, the Marines, the Navy, and the Air Corps, and Coast Guard, the rest of them, all of them are there. The way that came about 2 years ago, Secretary Principi was Secretary of Veterans Affairs at that time. It came to our attention that at Fort Stewart there were soldiers there waiting as long as 6 months to see a doctor who were in unair-conditioned barracks without running water. And when we heard that, we called Secretary Principi, and he immediately got with the Secretary of Defense and his people and made available a beautiful place in Augusta, Georgia, beautiful grounds, beautiful hospital, available only to active duty people of the armed forces. First it was Army, now it's others. I had an opportunity to call Secretary Principi and tell him the situation. He immediately acted on this, and we helped cut the ribbon for that facility in Augusta. And I highly commend the VA of the great job they're doing for these wounded troops down at Augusta. I saw a lieutenant he was totally blind, had been blinded, a lot without legs, without arms, and other disabilities. And I'm so proud of the fact that the VA has been able to take active duty people and give them the care and treatment that they certainly deserve. And they're getting good care and treatment down there at Augusta, Georgia now, and that's a great facility. And once they're discharged, they go back to other parts of the country probably. Some of them are Georgians, but not all of them. Not from every part of America are there because they're in all branches of the armed forces. And that's the first hospital in America, first VA hospital, and the only one now that takes care of active duty people who need hospital care. And they're doing a great job. It's pitiful to see some of these young men that they're having to take care of, but they're getting good care, I'm glad to say, at last.
We've talked about a number of personalities in the interview, Russell, LBJ. Could you talk a little bit about your relationship with Jimmy Carter?
Jimmy Carter is a good man. I liked him very much. He was, we disagreed on some things. We didn't agree on everything, but I think probably he thought I needed it. We had a lot of meetings, and he always called on me to pray, and I appreciate that. He wanted to he did reorganize state government, and the original plan was to take the welfare department, which was a separate department, the public health department, which was a separate department, and the veterans department, which is a separate department, and join them all together. And in a very friendly way, I told the governor that we would have to oppose that because we didn't feel that a veteran should be in the lobby with a welfare person. The veteran earned his benefit, and he was entitled to special service and a special department. And I'm happy to say that Governor Carter, after giving it much thought and after many people talked to him about it, agreed with us, and we maintain the Department of Veterans Service, which is a constitutional department same as the Board of Regents, Constitutional Board, rather. The governor gets one appointment each year, and they serve for 7-year terms. Have to be a veteran, of course, and a legal resident of Georgia. And we've had very excellent boards, constitutional boards, that govern the Department of Veterans Service. And they, in turn, elect the commissioner to a 4-year term, which I'm in my 14th now. And I've enjoyed every minute of it and looking forward to now. We've always had one project underway at all times, and we're now working on a cemetery project at Glenville where we'll open it and have a dedication ceremony approximately next September of next year, '07. And we have new projects going on all the time, improving the care and treatment of our veterans in our facilities.
Would you talk a little bit about your relationship with Joe Frank Harris?
Joe Frank Harris is a great American. I remember when he first came to the legislature, as a member of the legislature, I was a close friend of Sloppy Floyd. James Sloppy Floyd was chairman of the Appropriations Committee. And Sloppy Floyd was also a full-time employee of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. He was a quartermaster adjutant. We were very close friends. And I used to spend a lot of time with him, particularly when we had a session of the legislature. He controlled a lot of the money, really. A young man came in one day who had just been elected to the legislature from Cartersville, Georgia. And I never will forget Sloppy Floyd says, "This boy is going to amount to something one day." And sure enough, he did. He became governor of Georgia, and he was a great governor. And he served 2 terms, and I served with him 8 years, and he was a great governor. His son and my son went to law school together, and we're good friends. Even today, we're close friends. All the governors have been great people. I've enjoyed my work with all of them. Zell Miller and I are close friends and have been since he was in the Senate. He got elected to the state Senate, and I knew him at that time. And he was, of course, lieutenant governor and then governor and then senator, and a great American. And all of them have been great.
Could you talk a little bit in being in the job of commissioner for so many years, decades?
Yes.
There obviously are peaks and troughs in terms of funding. Could you talk a little bit about some of the...
We've always managed to get along. You have to know the people that make the decisions, and I made it a point to know the people that make the decisions. And most of them, very fortunately, have been close friends of mine that make the decisions. Even today, we are happy to know that the people over there are our friends. Most of them are very sympathetic. All of them are sympathetic with veterans. And we're very proud of the fact that we get what we need to operate efficiently and operate the department as it should be operated. We're not extravagant. I'm extremely conservative, very conservative on money and other things that are unnecessary to protect the taxpayers' money. But we get full value of our dollar. And our people are well trained out in the field. We have field officers, 41 field officers over the state, and each one receives a training where we can make sure that the veterans in their community get all they're entitled to. And we report that to the House members of that area that we're isolated, say, the area of the man that's in Athens, for example, at the University of Georgia. He will send letters out to the senators in that area that he covers and the representatives telling them how much we were able to do for the veterans of that area during the past year, and tell them also how we compare with states that have more veterans than we do and are getting less than our veterans are, showing him that the money that the state spends for our department is money well spent. We brought in altogether, helped bring in to Georgia last year over $2 billion in federal and benefits. That includes hospitalization and education and everything, but over $2 billion last year. And $2 billion as compared to about $32 million in state funds spent. And that is spent mainly for nursing home care for our sick and disabled veterans. We've never asked for a bonus in Georgia. We've always thought that the money should go to the sick and the disabled, not the well. And we never have paid a bonus and probably won't pay one because we think our money should go to people who need nursing care and who are Alzheimer's patients and people like that deserve it. And then a beautiful place to rest when they pass on, which we have beautiful cemeteries. And we are working on that now.
During the 1970s, there was a transition from essentially a conscript army to a volunteer army. Could you talk a little bit about the significance of that from your perspective in terms of the people that you serve?
Well, a veteran is a veteran as far as we're concerned, and I can't see any difference really other than one's a volunteer and the other was a lot of volunteers in World War II. Not all were drafted. In other wars, they were not all drafted. We had a lot of volunteers in all wars that we participated in. And I commend these young men and women that are volunteering to go into service. And we are happy to serve them as we were their fathers before them or their grandfathers before them, and make sure that they get all the benefits they're entitled to. And we don't show any distinction between one war to another war. A war is a war, whether it's declared or not. And the war in Vietnam, for example, back in the 1st Cavalry Division was the first large group of soldiers going into Vietnam. And they went in from Columbus, Georgia. And at one time, back in the 60s, in the early part of the Vietnam War, Vietnam was affected. I mean, the Columbus, Georgia residents were more affected by the Vietnam War than any other city in America. And we got together with the mayor and the newspaper down there in Columbus and the veterans organizations and the agencies that deal either directly or indirectly with Veterans Affairs, about 30 agencies, federal and state agencies, federal and state. We got them all under one roof, not to make speeches, but to bring in, we had the secretaries, the forms there, and we had over 5,000 people show up one day. And we started there the first supermarket of veterans benefits, which is now spread nationally. We've had one a year since then. The reason we haven't limited to one, we have to invite these agencies, and we can't force them to come, and we can get them once a year, all agencies. And this gets a person called a procrastinator. Pronounce it for me, Professor. Procrastinator.
Procrastinator.
You're right. And there are a lot of people who are procrastinators. For example, Social Security Administration has an office in most of these cities where we go. People put off going there. But if you're there just one day, between certain hours, it gets that procrastinator out of his house and he comes over. And the Social Security does a lot of business, even though they have an office located in that location. It gets that procrastinator out seeking his benefits. We now give flu shots and blood pressure checks. The VA hospitals have a place for that. We give free, the driver's licenses, some have been issued in the past at our supermarkets. The Game and Fish Commission issues the fishing and hunting permits. The veterans who are seeking jobs, we have the U.S. Department of Labor and the Georgia Department of Labor there that assist in that. We have what used to be the Civil Service Commission, which is now Personnel Management. Federal government has an agency there assisting veterans in obtaining employment. So we've got, that's the reason it's called a supermarket of veterans benefits. It goes from hospitalization. We have people from the cemeteries there talking about burial benefits. We have people from the insurance there talking about veterans insurance matters. Education. We have people from the schools and universities and the location where we go talking about education. We have our state approval agencies people there. And we have altogether about 30 federal and state agencies that are set up to do business in one day. And we always have at least 3,000 to 5,000 people present at these.
Who came up with the name Supermarket of Benefits?
I give it credit to a fellow who later became, we discussed it together, since we're bringing in all these agencies, different agencies, not just in the field of education, but jobs, hospitalization, burial benefits, insurance, and various licenses and all. He was editor, was one of the assistant editors of the paper in Columbus, who later moved over to a little insurance company there in Columbus, which is now known nationally, Aflac, the Duck. And I give him credit for helping me get started in the right way on this. And he was with the Columbus paper, and shortly after we held the supermarket, he went over with Aflac. Just a small company, started by a close friend of Senator Talmadge, John Amos, who was from Alabama originally and went to law school, and he was the city attorney for Fort Walton Beach before he moved to Columbus to start that little insurance company there in Columbus, John Amos. And his son is still there, is president of it, I think, now. It's a nationally known company now.
You sponsor an annual golf tournament.
Yes, we have a golf tournament every year to raise money for the homeless veterans. And we usually raise about $40,000 or more each year. We have been in several locations. Right now we're playing it at Fort McPherson. Before that we were at Eagles Landing, a beautiful course there. And the VA hospital has a group of people who work with homeless people. They locate them, some of them under bridges and doorways. First of all, you need to give them hospitalization and get them well. And we give them care and treatment, encourage them to take it. They get them in good shape. Once they are rehabilitated enough to have a job, they're assisted in finding one, and they use this money to pay for the transportation to and from their first job, and to pay for clothes, clean clothes, and workable clothes to work in, and a place to stay and a place to eat until they are out on their own. And about 99% of them have jobs. Otherwise, would be in doorways. And we're very proud of that program, the Homeless Veterans Program, operated by the VA hospital here in Atlanta. And we have another one. We usually have it in October. I usually hit the first ball. If I don't miss it, that's the reason they got the name Play It Again. I missed the first ball. You got to keep your eye on the ball, never look up. You got to keep your eye on the ball and then look up and see how far it went. And I make a mistake of looking up, see how far it went before I hit the ball. But I play it again.
When did your golf tournament start? How long have they been going on?
Oh, I'd say about 15 years, something like that, 12 or 15 years. I've forgotten it.
What gave you the idea?
Well, the people at the VA hospital and I were talking about how we could raise money to help veterans, and I agreed to help them sponsor a golf tournament. I was interested in golf back then. I don't play golf much anymore. In fact, I don't play at all. To do it right, it's a full-time job, and I don't have time to do it right. But I am able to hit one down the fairway, one a year. I can still do it. We got a VA hospital, I think one time, as a result of a golf course in Augusta, Georgia. The mayor of Augusta, George Sankin, at the time, was mayor of Augusta. He was a member of the Augusta National Golf Club. At that time, as a senator from South Carolina, I won't call his name, he's gone now, a good man, but he had the hospital set to go, a new VA hospital for Columbia, South Carolina. And we knew that the people that made the decision in Washington were big golfers. And George Sankin was able to set aside the golf course one day, and we brought down the top people that make decision makers from Washington. We visited Eisenhower's cabin. He was still living then, but he was living then in Pennsylvania. He was still there. They kept full-time staff there in his cabin. We went in there, and around the mirror, he and Mamie, every place they had ever lived, around the mirror, and bridge tables, he played bridge. His room was a little cubby hole with one bed in it and telephone and a mirror overlooking the par 3 course there in Augusta, at the Augusta National. We went in there, and around there was pictures made all around the time they were married, all the way to the time he was in the White House. And then the people that were down there, we played the course, the Augusta National, had lunch and dinner there. Thanks to George Sankin, who passed on last year, I believe. He was mayor of Augusta, who was a member. And we wound up getting the hospital in Augusta rather than Columbia. I don't know whether that had anything to do with it or not, but we certainly encouraged it during that golf match. So you're talking about golf, we go into that.
Yeah, it's part of business in America, just as it is in Japan and Korea, right?
I'm not familiar with Japan or Korea, but it certainly helps to know the people you're dealing with, and it doesn't hurt to get acquainted with them on a name basis if you want to get anything done.
I'm kind of curious about any thoughts you have on an incident that occurred back in 1995 around the 50th anniversary of the end of World War II. The controversy over the historical exhibit involving the atomic bomb at the end of World War II at the Smithsonian. Do you recall? Did that?
Saved my life. I was ready to go to the South Pacific, and I praise the Lord. I should praise Him every night for dropping it. Harry Truman did the right thing, and he saved a lot of American lives and a lot of Japanese lives by dropping that bomb, or we'd still be fighting over it today. And it saved my life, and I wouldn't be here today if it hadn't dropped it. And I've got the picture of the man in my office in there that dropped it, and Paul Tibbets. And he was a great American, and he visited here not too long ago. And Paul dropped it, and I'm proud to say that he's a great American in my book, and he ought to be honored in every way possible. He's an unusual fellow. He's a great fellow, a great American. But I'm glad he dropped the bomb. And thank God we had Harry Truman there that dropped it. One thing that tickled me about Truman was it took Ms. Truman 10 years to teach Harry to use the word manure rather than the other way.
There were some other words too.
He was a great.
She had to work with
he was a great American. Harry Truman was, and thank God he was President of the United States. Alvin Barkley was a great man from Kentucky. Very few people know that Alvin Barkley, who was vice president during some of that time, graduated from school here in Georgia. Did you know that? He went to Emory at Oxford before it became Emory in Atlanta. And his wife passed away, and he remarried. And I can remember when $5 was just a tremendous amount of money. He on his honeymoon, he spent the first night at the Ansler Hotel in Atlanta, and then went down to Sea Island. And he tipped the bellboy $5, and that made the front page. Tipping so much money, tipped him so much money.
Wish we could get away with
But
that
he
today.
was he graduated from Emory when it was at Oxford, Georgia. Well, it's still Emory at Oxford Junior College now, but he was a graduate of Emory University. A lot of people don't know that. That's where he got his training in Georgia. He's a great American. Vice President.
I'm kind of curious about with the war in Iraq and the obviously much increased reliance on National Guard troops. Do you foresee, I mean, back when I was in the National Guard, you had to, unless you served, I think it was 6 months on active duty for purposes other than training, you weren't really eligible for
That's correct.
veterans benefits. And obviously a lot of National Guardsmen are now eligible for benefits that they wouldn't have. But would you foresee that because we're clearly going to be relying on these people more, that there's likelihood that all National Guardsmen will be eligible for more benefits?
I would hope so. We would be in bad shape if we didn't have a National Guard, and I'm real proud of the fact that they are now going down to the border to stop illegals from coming into this country, some of which could be terrorists. For all we know, they all could be. I don't know. I think everybody coming into this country ought to be checked as they are in other countries, as they are checked in Mexico. When you go in there, they check you out pretty well. People from South America are checked out pretty well. I know they check them out in Australia. They want to know where you are every night that you're there and what you're doing there and how long you're going to be there and whether or not you're going to work there or not when you go into Australia. I've been there several times, and they check you very closely in New Zealand and other countries, China. And China is coming to be a great competitor of ours. I've spent some time there over China. And I'm happy the fact that they recognize a Georgia product in China. And I've got to show you this. On all the airlines in China, if you fly from Beijing to Hong Kong to Beijing, that's across the back seat of every airline. That's Coca-Cola, holy water. It's in Chinese. And I took one off the back of my seat when I was flying from Beijing from Hong Kong. And Coca-Cola is doing well in China. A lot of Georgia products are going into China. And we are getting a lot of Chinese products into Georgia. Probably too many, but it's a growing country. And they check people going in and out of there, too, as you know, in other countries, too.
And check them after they're there as well.
You're right about that. And it's a big country, too. And a fellow from Atlanta, John Portman, has built a hotel over there in Shanghai, I believe. And we have a lot of interest over there. I never will forget, I visited the American Embassy there one time in Beijing. That's where President Bush Sr. was the first ambassador, one of the first ambassadors to China. And he goes back quite often, I understand.
Well, we haven't talked about Richard Nixon, and since that was one of his great initiatives in terms of opening up.
Henry Kissinger did a great job as Secretary of Defense, and Nixon went to school at Duke, as you know, up in North Carolina, a little school up in North Carolina called Duke, which has been in the news lately. They have a soccer team up there. And while we're talking about Duke, did you realize that the Rose Bowl in 1943 was played in Duke in Durham, North Carolina? Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
You know why it was played in Durham?
Well, probably because they were afraid of...
They attacked at Pearl Harbor December the 7th, 1941, and they were very worried that the attack was going to extend to our coast, west coast, including Pasadena. And Duke was in the Rose Bowl, as I remember, and so they played the Rose Bowl in 1942 in Durham. And I've got to say this, in 1943, the University of Georgia from Athens town played UCLA in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, and I was there. And
You were
we
in-
won, and we won. And I was still at the University of Georgia, and I saw President Cobb there and told him, I said, I may be a little late. Can you help me get back in school when I get back? And he said, yes, I'll help you. And I knew the registrar very well at the university, Uncle Tom Reed. Uncle Tom Reed was a registrar, and he lived on the campus there at the university. And he taught Sunday school at the First Methodist Church. And I was smart enough to go to Sunday school class and walk with him over to the First Methodist Church on Sunday morning. I lived in Old College, which was one of the oldest dormitories on the campus of the university, and was the last, I think several of us were the last students that lived there that moved out of Old College. And the Navy took it over then, and I don't know what you have over there now, but
It's about to be the home of the Franklin College of Arts and Sciences.
well, that's good. It's a great place, and I lived in a room that Robert Toombs lived in and Alexander Stevens. Show you how long that room was still there, and we moved out of it. Robert Toombs, you know, had an oak tree named for him over there. And he was an unusual man, number one in his class, but he made the graduation speech under an oak tree. He indulged a little bit, too much, probably. But everybody came out of the chapel to hear him speak. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You're the professor.
That's
right?
correct. Of course, it was an awfully hot day, too. That may have had a little something to do with it.
Well, I don't think they had any air conditioning then. But Toombs was a great speaker. And there are many great stories about Robert Toombs, as you know. And little Alexander Stevens, I know they had a debate one night, and Alexander Stevens, Robert Toombs said, you little drawed up shrimp, said, I could eat you up. He said, if you did, you'd have more brains in your stomach than you got in your head. You remember that?
I remember reading about it.
They were great Americans. The university is a great place, and I'd like to go back.
Commissioner, that's about all the questions we have for you. Jim, do you want to ask, would you like to make any further comments?
Well, let me say this. I'm happy that I was fortunate enough to live near the University of Georgia at the city of Crawford. And I'm glad the city of Crawford has a stoplight, and the city of Texas, Crawford, has a blinking light. We got 12 more people than they have. I'm glad I lived there because I got to see the first game played at the stadium, Sanford Stadium. I'm proud of the fact that I knew Sanford, Chancellor Sanford lived in Athens while he was chancellor. He tipped his hat to every lady he saw on the street. Great American, Chancellor Sanford. And Harmon Caldwell was the president of the university. And Uncle Tom Reed worked on the Banner Herald in Athens when Henry Grady, who your school of journalism named after, was the editor. He later came to Atlanta, but Uncle Tom Reed worked with him on the Banner Herald in Athens before he moved to Atlanta to become, I think, the editor of the Atlanta Constitution. Henry Grady, you have the Henry Grady School of Journalism. And first game, we beat Yale, and I met Catfish Smith that day, and he was All-American from the University of Georgia. And of course, Frank Sinkwich and I were close friends, and there's a picture on my desk of Wally Butts, Frank Sinkwich and I. Sinkwich was the best man at my wedding, and we were dear friends. And he won the Heisman Trophy that year and was Athlete of the Year. He was from Youngstown, Ohio. And I'm glad that I was there in school with Carl Sanders, was a freshman, and Ernest Vandiver, who's later governor, was a senior. So Athens means a great deal to me, and the university does. And I'm very proud I have a grandson over there now who's going to get 2 degrees in the fall, an A.B. degree and a B.S. degree at the same time. And I know he'll be Phi Beta Kappa. His mother was. And God bless you. And it's just an honor to live here in Georgia and be a citizen of the greatest country in the world the United States of America. And I'm very proud of our flag and all it stands for and all it represents. It represents the blood of so many of our veterans. And when I pass on, and I hope I'm not getting up a crowd to go today, but when I do, I hope they have the American flag on top of it, and I'll be saluting it, laying there saluting it. It's great to be American and be proud of it, and stand up for America whenever you get an opportunity, and stand up for our veterans who made it possible for all of us to enjoy the freedom that we enjoy, and many of us take for granted as Americans. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is a picture of Senator Bob Dole and I when he came in to help us raise the money for the World War II Memorial. He was chairman of the campaign committee, and I had the honor of being chairman of the advisory commission for the World War II Memorial. This is a picture of the groundbreaking for the World War II Memorial. That's Tom Hanks, Secretary of Defense, and I'm sitting over there. 1940, the last picture Senator Russell had made, and this one was Congressman Cobb, Vincent, the Great American. Be dedicated next September. This is a new bridge joining the VA hospital and the VA regional office together. Governor Talmadge, Governor Griffin, Governor Vanderbilt, Governor Sanders, Governor Maddox, Governor Carter, Governor Busby, Governor Harris, Governor Miller, Governor Bonds, and the present governor, Governor Perdue.